Welcome back to Lumify. In this one, we're going to be talking about task workflows. And in fact, we're going to call this video the ultimate guide to task workflows. First, we're going to talk about designing workflows, creating custom tasks, the different types of tasks that you can create between manual tasks, emails, and automations. And we're also going to talk about how you can add custom event statuses. But we're also going to talk about how to use your task workflows to optimize and streamline your business. And that includes adding workflows to events, setting a default workflow for different event types, and also customizing emails or automations before they actually go and run. So with that, let's go ahead and hop right into it. All right, so here we are in the task workflows screen. And the way that you get to this is on the left navigation here, navigate down to task workflows, hit that, and you'll see all of your task workflows. By default, you get a task workflow that says default task workflow, and the description is it's an example task workflow. And we'll actually use this to get started. Just so that we can keep this clean as we keep going, I'm going to actually go in and duplicate the task workflow so that we can have sort of the original state and then what we're going to do here as far as experiments. For the purposes of this video, let's treat this task workflow as something specific to wedding events, for example. So we can say this is the wedding event task workflow, and you'll only use this task workflow with weddings. Great. So the first thing that you'll want to notice here is your task workflow is broken down into phases or stages. And each of these stages is actually an event status that is configurable down in your event options. So typically when you get a lead in, you would call them a lead or you'd call them a prospect. And that would be the first stage that a certain event would be in. Once that prospect has agreed to your proposal or your quote, you might want to move them over to a pending stage. That might mean that they're waiting on a contract to be signed. That might mean that they're waiting to review a proposal. You can kind of customize this, and we'll talk about how you can customize this. Once the client has filled out the proposal or completed a contract, signed a contract, you would move them over to the confirm stage. And there would be certain tasks that are associated with that. And finally, on the default workflow, at least, there's a loss section that allows you to run certain tasks in case you don't end up winning this client's business. So let's hop over to the prospect tab. And actually, before we move any further, I want to show you how you can customize your event statuses. Let's hop into event options. Let's click event statuses. And down here, we'll see prospect. And this maps one-to-one with our task workflows. So if we actually update this to lead and we hit save, we'll see when we go back to our task workflows. Oh, we didn't actually save our changes there. Let's go back and make sure we save our changes. This is wedding event task workflow for use with wedding events. Cool. Let's make sure we save our changes there. But importantly here, you're seeing lead instead of prospect. So when you have a lead come in, the first thing that you might want to do, and we've actually talked about this in another video, the first thing you might want to do is say, hey, thanks for contacting us. We appreciate you reaching out. We'll get back to you as soon as possible. And the cool thing is here, we can have this email, this autoresponder email, get sent out automatically on the due date, which just so happens to be 1 hour after the event was created, for example. Now, if you wanted to send it right immediately after the contact reached out, you can say 0 hours after event created. And that'll give you the effect of being an autoresponder. Immediately after the client hits submit on your contact form, this will go out to that contact. So what we're actually looking at here is a task. And each stage, we just talked about stages, each event stage has associated tasks. And so the first task that we're looking at was that autoresponder email we were just talking about. And this task can either be just a manual task that you would have to check off and make sure that you complete, sort of as a checklist, or it can be an email that gets sent to the client, either automatically or manually. or it could be an automation. And we'll talk about each of these, but let's go ahead and start with email. So in the email type of task, you can choose the recipients. And when it says to client, what that means is this email will be pre-populated with any clients that are listed on this event. So let's actually go take a quick look at that, how that might look in practice, so that it's a little bit more of a concrete example. Let's go to our event. And what we'll see here is that this is an example event. There is one client on here, or one contact on here, and that one contact is of the client contact type. And so when this task is assigned, it will automatically pre-populate under here the client information. I actually manually went in here and added my name, but what you'll see is that it'll pre-populate something like this. So, another example of that might be if you have someone else on this event that is of, let's say, family type, and we hit save. What'll happen is when you go into your task workflow and define the recipient to be family, that family contact will be pre-populated into this email. But by default, for this type of autoresponder, usually you would want the client to be there. Cool. So that is the email type of task. Now, you might be wondering, what is a task versus an email? A task is really, like I said earlier, a checklist item. What it allows you to do is sort of create a note to self saying, hey, I need to go and do this thing. In this case, this task is confirm event date is available. So one day after the event is created, one day after you receive the contact form request, this task will become due. And it'll be assigned, I think by default it goes to the disc jockey, but you can choose who you want to assign it to. And it basically shows up as a task in your task list saying, hey, go and check if this event date is available. And you can also add notes in there as well. So before proceeding with this event, you should confirm the date is available. You can put whatever you want in there. And so the last type of task that you can assign is an automation type. And what an automation task does is it allows you to run automations, just what it sounds like. And what you'll be presented with here as an option is any automation that you have saved that uses the event task workflow trigger. And we've talked about this in other videos, but if you go to your automations and you look at your triggers, you'll see that there's a task workflow automation trigger, and that allows you to trigger certain automations from an event. So let's hop right back into our task workflow. And just really quickly to summarize, we talked about the email type of task, we talked about the manual task, and we also talked about automations. Cool. So let's talk about adding stages, a new stage to your task workflow. So let's say, for example, between confirmed and lost, you want to add a stage that says canceled. Let's say you want to distinguish for whatever reason between canceled events and lost events. Maybe canceled events, lets the client rebook you at a later time. So when you want to add in, I'm going to delete this really quick, so I went a little bit fast there. But when you want to add a new stage, you can click the little plus button that shows up between stages, and you can hit the event status that you want to add. In this case, we're going to add canceled. And when we hit create status, it'll show up here just where you put it. Now you can also drag and drop your stages. So for example, if you wanted to put canceled at the end after lost, you can also do that. That just sort of gives you a sort of sequence. It allows you to sequence your stages for your task workflows. So under the new status that we just created here in this task workflow, you'll see that we can add whatever tasks that we want. Out of the box, it comes with a example task here. But we could say if the event is canceled, follow. We can add in a task here that says follow up with client 1 year after canceling, something like that. And you can make it do 365 days after event date, something like that. You can choose any of these triggers here. There's a ton of different, starting points and ending points for your tasks. I think in this case, we might want to do, let's do after status change to current. And what that means is when you move the event to canceled, this task will become due 365 days after that. So a year after you moved the event to canceled. And we can assign this, to the disc jockey. And the note to self could be, this client has credit with company. They have already paid a deposit. Need to confirm when the client wants to rebook. Now you can easily turn this into an email that goes directly to the client. And the way that you could do this is you could switch it over to the email type, and you can same due date, right? The due date would be the same, but the recipient would be client. And you might want to have this automatically send a year after you move it to canceled. And you can basically make this an email directly to the client and say, hey, have you considered rebooking your event? Right? And you can have, whatever content you want in there. You can put any merge tags in there related to the event. So you can say, hey, you canceled event title, ... and whatever else you want to say there. So you can see how powerful this can be to help you optimize and really automate your business without really too much heavy lifting. So we've talked a lot about designing your task workflows. Now let's actually go into an event and see how this actually works. So let's do this from the client's perspective. Let's use our contact form. Oh, let's make sure we save. We want to make sure we save all of our changes here. Let's go into the contact form and let's go ahead and fill out this form as if we were a client, and let's see what happens. So let's submit this form. And so you'll get an email saying, hey, you have a new contact form submission. That event will also show up here under your events. And obviously the contact will be linked to that event. But what you're noticing is that there are no task workflows here. Where's all the tasks that you just created? You can add a task workflow to any event at any time by clicking next to the event title. You click that little button, and you can choose any task workflow here. And so we're going to choose the wedding event task workflow, hit assign workflow, and that's going to add the task workflow directly to this event. And you'll see that all of the tasks that we were just looking at in the designer show up here. So you have your email type, you have your task type, and your automation types here. And what you'll also notice is that the client has been populated in the to field, and that all of the content for this email has been brought over. And you'll also see that the due date is populated. And in this case, this task is designed to be sent directly on the due date. And so, when it hits July 13th at 10 p.m., this email is going to get sent automatically. Great. So now what if you wanted to send the email manually? What if you wanted to review every single email before it started sending, just because you don't trust technology for whatever reason, right? So you can disable that switch down there and you can hit save task. And actually, if that's the case, if you want to send every single email manually, what you'd want to do is go back into the task workflow section and design your task workflows to turn off the send automatically on due date for all of the tasks. And by default, when you get Lumify, that is actually how it is set up. That was just checked there on that first task, just for example. But by default, no emails get sent without you hitting a button, without you manually sending an email. You would have to configure each of these tasks to do that for you. So let's go back to that event. And let's see what else we have here. So this task is not being sent automatically. So you might have noticed that we had to manually add this task workflow. What if you want to have a task workflow assigned to every event without having to click extra buttons? Now, there's an easy way to do that. You can go into your event options under event types, And you can choose any of your event types here. And you can assign several defaults. There's a whole video on assigning defaults to your events. You can assign default playlists, default planning forms, timelines, notes, etc. You can assign all kinds of defaults to your events based on event type. But you can also assign a task workflow. So for our wedding reception type of event, maybe we want to add the default wedding event task workflow to these types of events. So if we do that and hit save, and we create a new event with this type, let's make this a wedding reception type, and let's give it a date. And let's also give it a contact. And we hit save. What we'll see is automatically that task workflow is loaded. I didn't have to click any extra buttons there. So that's a really powerful tool. And you can do the same thing with your contact forms. Even if you don't want your client staff to select wedding on the list of event types, you can add a hidden event type field. So let's say that we wanted to add a new field, event type. We're going to make this hidden, and we're going to choose a default value of wedding reception and hit save. Now, what you'll notice is in this contact form, it doesn't have a question for event type. That is a hidden question. But you can call this form your wedding client contact form. Something like that. And whenever someone fills this out, so you can say, test client. Ooh, wow. Test client. Test at lumifylabs.com. Whatever you want there. And what we'll see is when this event gets created, that it'll automatically have that task workflow. So again, super powerful here. Now let's say that you're in the middle of booking an event. They're still in the lead status, but the client has asked you to do something, and you don't want to lose track of it, and you want to add it here as a task. Well, that's really easy to do. You can go in here and hit add task. You can say client request, ... whatever it is, the client's asked you to pull pricing for some rental, and you need to get back to them on a certain date. So you can put it in the task there, and you can even put in a due date here for yourself. You can say, I need to get back to them before next month, whatever it is. You can put a time in there as well, and you can assign yourself on this task. So if you save that, you'll see that that task is now loaded in here, and it'll also show up in your tasks under the taskbar. Cool. So what if you're in a situation where, it turns out, the client put the wrong event type, or maybe it was miscategorized, and we have the event task workflow here, but that's not really what we wanted. Well, there's an easy option here where you can replace this entire task workflow with another workflow. So if you hit the button right here next to the workflow, you can change the workflow to the default task workflow, for example, and we can even clear out any manually created tasks, like that client request task that we manually created. If we click that, that'll delete everything out of there, but by default, that is unchecked. And if you replace the workflow, you'll see that that custom canceled status is gone, and that manual task that we created is also gone. So a really easy way to sort of keep everything tidy, make sure that all of your tasks are relevant for the type of event. So the last thing that I want to talk about here is how you can customize emails on the fly. And let's say for this client, we know some specific facts. We may have seen them at a bridal show, and we know a little bit more details about what they're looking for. Maybe we want to come in here and add some additional details to the email. Well, you can customize the email right here before you actually go in and send the email. So we can say, hey there, contact name. We got your inquiry. We're working to respond. Also, it was so great to meet you at the whatever bridal show. So then you can go down here and hit send email, and that'll go and send the email with your changes. So overall, I hope that's helpful. I hope that sort of shows the power of the task workflows here. Allows you to do a lot of really interesting things, allows you to run automations, allows you to automate your emails, and also allows you to keep organized by assigning tasks to different folks on your team, including yourself. And before we end this video here, I want to do a plug for our community website. There is a Lumify community where folks share different task workflows. These task workflows can be exported. So for example, if we wanted to take this default workflow, we can export it down to our desktop. We could save it, and then we can come in here and we can import the workflow just like that. And it takes 1 second to import a workflow from another company. Maybe one of your friends has built a workflow, or from our community. So I highly encourage folks to go on the community and see what others have created. There's some really powerful workflows out there that you can use, that you can download right away and start using to get a head start on your journey to optimize your business. So really encourage everyone to go to community.lumifylabs.com. And with that, we'll see you in the next one.